This roof and salmon are connected. Recycled tires are often used for the flat roofs of commercial buildings like this one. And researchers have found that a chemical created when tires react to ozone is fatal to salmon. So the next time it rains, toxic tire particulate will wash off this roof, flow through the streets, and spread into our waterways. And that's just one of the many ways that the worlds of transportation and salmon are intertwined. So come with us as we visit 3 Oregon sites that'll change the way you think about salmon and the roadways we use every day. Our first stop is the Clackamas Fish Hatchery, located just southeast of Portland in Milo McIver State Park. Hatcheries like this one are designed to collect, incubate, and raise fish in a controlled environment to support wildlife conservation efforts. I'm here on this very Oregon day to talk with hatchery manager Dan Straw about how fish grow in and navigate the vast environment they live in. So Dan, can you walk me through a bit of what you do here at the hatchery and how you preserve wildlife like salmon and steelhead?
Yeah, so a day in the life at the hatchery here. There's 4 of us that work here full-time, year-round, staff members, and our primary goal of what we're trying to do is put fish back into the river that would have otherwise been here naturally. We collect adults, we will spawn them, we raise them up in the ponds, and then we release them.
Can you tell me about the life cycle of a salmon?
Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. So salmon is an anadromous fish, meaning that they are born in freshwater and then they're maturing in saltwater, then they come back to freshwater to reproduce. So the adults will return from the ocean, from their place of birth, origin, in a freshwater stream, river. They'll make a little nest essentially in the gravel of that river or stream, lay their eggs. Those eggs will incubate in that creek, hatch up as fry, and then depending on where they are, the water temperatures, environment, stuff like that, it takes about a year, similar to what we do here at the hatchery. And then when those fry mature into smolts in freshwater, they will out-migrate to the ocean. And then that's where they'll spend the next couple of years maturing to adults and then return back to freshwater.
Wow.
We release these fish directly from the ponds that they're in. We literally will go and pull the screens that have held them back, and then they flow directly into the Clackamas River.
Wow.
There's no more dams or any kind of infrastructure other than maybe bridge pylons and things like that. And so from here, they will go directly to the ocean.
So Dan, why is the work you do here at the hatchery so important?
Not only for the fish, maintaining original populations is really important. I don't think we want any specific group to be lost due to infrastructure that we also need as people. By having the hatcheries here, we can make sure that those populations of fish aren't lost. I think maintaining the natural origin groups is just really important, not only for us, but because we can also take those fish when they come back and give back. We're providing to the community, to the tribal organizations that have lived here forever and ever. And we're really here just to make sure that what was will continue for our enjoyment, for sustainability, for all those things.
Do you have a favorite fact about salmon that you'd like to share?
A favorite fact? Well, I don't know that it's groundbreaking information, but it is so fascinating that these fish can be released from the tiniest river, the tiniest stream, and make their way into the ocean. In some cases, they swim all the way over to Japan, into Russia, Gulf of Alaska, and then they find their way right back here to Clackamas Hatchery. It's just fascinating.
Wow.
How they do it, researchers think they got a couple ideas. Everything from the magnetic pole of the earth, like they have a little compass in their head that helps them navigate, to the chemical signature of an individual river, stream, and water body that they can smell, for lack of a better term. I just find it fascinating that those fish are able to do that.
The next stop on our salmon fact-finding mission is here at the Vernier Science Center at Portland State University. Today we'll be talking with Emma Johnson, the Indigenous Traditional, Ecological, and Cultural Knowledge Coordinator. So tell me about some of the connections between Indigenous communities in the Pacific Northwest and salmon.
So they are cultural keystone species, and that really just means that they are like the core, the heart of so much of who we are as a people. You can relate that back to who they are, like as a fish who's supplies us and continues to supply us with a really important food source. And also as an active participant in their ecosystems to care for other beings. And then also just like as the super cool fish at the core of how many tribal folks honor salmon are for salmon ceremonies.
Oh.
And that is a way for folks to gather in community and honor salmon for who they are and what they give to us. And so our canoe family will be in one of our traditional canoes, and they're gonna come to shore on one of our tribal parcels that's located on the Cowlitz River, which is one of our ancestral rivers. And they're gonna bring this salmon relative in with them. And those salmon friends generally have important plant friends hanging around them. And we, of course, are going to have salmon that day, and we're going to talk about who salmon is, and maybe some stories will be shared and questions will be asked. But it's really a way to just bring people together and be we're coming here strictly to acknowledge and honor who salmon is and continues to be for our people.
What is it that you wish more people knew about salmon?
You don't have to approach knowing salmon feeling overwhelmed. I wish more people knew that even the littlest bit of life they could share with salmon would help them, both of them, the human and the salmon. A lot of folks that eat salmon buy it from a store or get it at a restaurant, and they love salmon. That's why they're buying it. So they're spending their money on it. Right? There's this whole chain of how the salmon came to be on their plate. And they're the end of that chain, the buyer. I just am asking folks to take a pause and be what do I have the capacity to share with salmon? Can I read an article? Can I go out to a local river system where I know they return to spawn and do some type of tending or pick up trash? But salmon, additionally, on top of being a cultural keystone species, are a really important teacher. We can see how fierce they are, making their way back up through all of these obstacles that are now in their way. A lot of people, to support human transportation, essentially, will disregard the transportation of other animals.
So we've learned a lot about salmon today from our specialists, but we still have one more stop to tie salmon to our transportation system. Our third and final stop is Burgholzer Creek, but specifically, this culvert. Culverts help water flow under roads, but fish also need to use them to navigate streams and rivers as they migrate to and from the ocean. But if a culvert is too small or misaligned with the river, salmon can struggle to get through because water flows too fast, preventing them from spawning. So we've brought in Kittleson Senior Water Resources Engineer Daniel Child to teach us how we can design transportation that works for salmon. So Daniel, tell me a little bit about what you do as a water resources engineer for a transportation firm.
So a lot of the work that I do is related to dealing with stormwater once it interacts with our transportation environment. Water falls from the sky, hits the surface around us, and I've got to figure out what to do with it once it does that. So culverts ease the interaction between the natural drainage environment, your rivers, your streams, your creeks, and the transportation environment. This is how we get water from a creek past our roadway in a safe and sustainable manner.
So tell me about this culvert specifically. What makes it special and why is it so good for fish?
So this culvert is a replacement of an existing culvert that was less than ideal. The original culvert was about 100-inch corrugated metal pipe. Likely when it was first constructed, was just placed on the riverbed and a road was built right over the top. And over time, it created a large hole at the downstream end as water dropped from the top to the bottom. A drop like that, and what we saw here previously, was a barrier to those fish. They can no longer access the watershed here at Burgholzer Creek. So this culvert is what's called an open bottom culvert. And what makes that unique is the bottom of this culvert isn't a metal pipe or a concrete box, but it's a stream bed. And the fish that move through this culvert have no idea that they're actually in a man-made structure.
Yeah.
We used natural bioengineered solutions to reduce risk of erosion and to direct the water into the culvert in a way that creates a sustainable dynamic solution. In this case, we used buried wood and root balls to direct water into the culvert and act as a revetment. But as opposed to conventional revetment like rock or gabion walls or concrete, this is a natural solution that mimics what you see in the natural environment. Trees fall into creeks all the time.
Yeah.
And they actively provide habitat for fish.
So what are some of the signs that a culvert isn't working?
So there are the obvious ones. As I explained before, the previous culvert had started to collapse. That's a failed culvert. You could see the water falling from the edge of the culvert into a pool. That is not a culvert that is sustainable or really passable for a lot of these fish.
Well, now that we've learned a bit about culverts, what are some of the other transportation issues that affect fish and salmon specifically?
Roadways and anywhere a car travels, think parking lots, generate a lot of pollutants. Some of those are direct. So right now, there is a very, very deadly pollutant in the environment in the Northwest called 6-PPD-quinone. It is acutely toxic to Chinook salmon. It's also quite toxic to steelhead, and juvenile species will die within seconds of exposure to this toxin, and it comes from tires. Our roadway environment is a direct contributor to the death of an endangered species. Now, like I said, it doesn't just apply to the roads, it applies to parking lots. And something parking lots are large expanses of impervious area.
Impervious meaning?
Impervious meaning when rain falls on them, it doesn't get to soak into the ground.
I
and
see.
move through the geologic system. It runs very quickly from that surface, usually through pipes and directly out to streams. We've had decades of dealing with this in some way or another here, especially in the Northwest. And we found that a lot of ways, nature is the best at managing these systems. Where we need to remove pollutants, we found that contact with soil and exposure to plants, microbiomes within the soil itself, actively work to remove pollutants from stormwater. So if we send the stormwater to a rain garden, if we take this water and send it through a natural substrate, we can remove those pollutants before it gets to the stream.
And here we've got an example of the water cycle in action. So Daniel, what can transportation professionals do to support salmon and other aquatic species?
That's a great question. I think really it's important to look at the big picture. Our transportation network is there for a lot of different purposes. And moving people is oftentimes seen as the primary purpose. And it's important to look at all these secondary purposes, the impact it has on the environment around it and outside of it. We need to think about, how does this project impact the world around it? And one part of that is thinking about, how do we impact salmon?
But what about the everyday person? Salmon do so much to support their ecosystem, the resources we all depend on, and us. What can you and I be doing to support them? To answer this question, we've come back to where we started. The first step is awareness. Everything that we've learned today helps widen our viewpoint of how connected our shared world is. The roads we use every day can make the difference of survival for these vital species. Step 2, keep learning and get involved in making your community's transportation projects salmon-friendly by improving water quality, reducing erosion, and planting vegetation along stream beds. Because what's good for fish is good for people.